This isn't just history. It's a story that will change how you see courage, leadership, and life. Hello, dear learners. Welcome back to our channel, where English learning becomes an unforgettable adventure. Today, we invite you to join one of the most powerful journeys in modern history, the life story of Nelson Mandela. This is not just a story about a leader. It's about hope, courage, and the power to forgive. Through this story, you'll improve your English vocabulary, boost your listening skills, and get inspired to dream bigger than ever before. Whether you're a student, a teacher, or just someone who loves good storytelling, this one's for you. So get ready to learn English through the unforgettable journey of a man who changed the world, one step at a time. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you enjoy stories that inspire and help you grow. Let's begin. A boy from the village. In the quiet hills of South Africa, surrounded by wide fields and the songs of birds, a little boy was born in 1918. His name was Rolihlahla Mandela. In his native Xhosa language, Rolihlahla means pulling the branch of a tree, but many people said it also meant troublemaker. Nobody knew that this child would one day grow up to challenge an entire system of injustice and change the world. Rolihlahla was born in a small village called Mvizo, in the eastern Cape of South Africa. His family belonged to the Thembu people, a proud tribe with a long history of leadership. His father, Gadla Henry Mfakanyiswa, was a local chief and a counselor to the Thembu king. Though they were not rich in money, the Mandelas were respected in their community. Mandela's mother, Nosekeni Fanny, was a quiet and kind woman. She was a strong Christian and taught her son the importance of humility, kindness, and faith. From both parents, young Rolihlahla learned to live with dignity, even in difficult times. The Mandela home was simple. It was made of mud and straw, and there was no electricity or running water. Rolihlahla played outside barefoot, ran through the tall grass, and herded cattle under the sun. He swam in clean streams, climbed trees, and laughed with his friends. These were the happiest days of his life. At night, he would sit with other children around the fire and listen to the old men of the village. They told stories of brave warriors, wise kings, and fearless leaders. These stories were not just for fun, they were lessons. They taught about honor, responsibility, and courage. Each tale planted a seed in young Mandela's heart. One day, his father sat with him under a tree and said, "A real leader is not someone who wants power. A real leader is someone who serves his people." Those words stayed with him forever. But life changed suddenly when Mandela was just 9 years old. His father became ill and died. For the first time, Mandela felt the deep pain of loss. It was a heavy sadness, but also a turning point in his life. After his father's death, Mandela was sent to live with Chief Janjantaba Dalindyebo, the acting regent of the Thembu nation. The chief treated Mandela like a son and gave him a chance to see a world beyond his small village. Mandela now lived in the royal palace of the Thembu. It was bigger than anything he had ever seen. He watched tribal meetings, listened to political discussions, and learned about justice and leadership. These experiences helped shape his young mind and opened the door to a new future. Mandela began school at the age of 7. On his first day, his teacher gave him a new name, Nelson. This was a common practice in South African schools at the time, where African children were given English names. Mandela did not understand why his name had to change, but he accepted it quietly. From that day on, Rolihlahla became Nelson Mandela. Lessons from elders and first injustices. Nelson Mandela was not just a curious boy. He was a thinker, a listener, and a dreamer. Living under the care of Chief Janjantaba, he was surrounded by discussions of leadership, tradition, and justice. Mandela sat quietly in corners of meetings, absorbing every word the elders spoke. He was still just a boy, but inside him, a storm of ideas had already begun. In the royal household, Mandela learned about duty and honor. He saw how the chief made decisions that affected the lives of many. Sometimes, the chief would ask Mandela to sit beside him. This was a special honor, and Mandela never forgot it. He was learning not from books, but from real-life examples of leadership. At school, Mandela was a serious student. He was curious about everything, especially history, geography, and literature. He wanted to understand the world beyond his village, beyond South Africa. He loved reading about heroes, people who stood up for what was right. But even in school, he began to notice something strange. The history he learned often celebrated the British Empire and ignored the strength and wisdom of African people. The schools were meant to produce obedient workers, not leaders. Mandela felt the injustice of this, though he could not yet explain it with words. As Mandela grew older, he began to understand the deeper meaning of the world around him. In South Africa, black people and white people lived under a system called apartheid, a word that means separateness. But it was more than just separation. It was a cruel system that gave rights and power only to white people and took freedom away from black South Africans. Black people could not vote. They could not own land in most places. They were not allowed to enter white-only areas, go to white schools, or even sit on the same benches. Mandela saw it everywhere, in cities, in schools, and in the way people were treated on the streets. At the age of 16, Mandela took part in a traditional Xhosa initiation ceremony. This ceremony marked the transition from boy to man. It was a moment of pride, but also a time of deep reflection. During the event, elders spoke about what it meant to be a man, but their voices were filled with sorrow. They spoke about how their people had lost their land, their freedom, and their dignity under apartheid. Mandela listened carefully. He could feel the sadness in their words, but also their strength. That day, Mandela felt a powerful emotion inside him, a sense of duty. He knew he could not stay silent. He would find a way to fight for justice. Back at home, Chief John Jintaba had other plans for Mandela. The chief wanted him to follow tradition and marry a young woman from a respected family. But Mandela had different dreams. He wanted to choose his own path. He wanted more education. He wanted to understand the world and change it. So, at the age of 19, Mandela did something bold. He packed his few belongings and ran away to the city of Johannesburg, a place filled with danger, opportunity, and the unknown. In Johannesburg, Mandela saw a completely different side of life. The city was fast, noisy, and crowded. Here, the divisions between black and white were even clearer. White people lived in beautiful houses and drove shiny cars. Black people lived in tiny, overcrowded rooms, worked long hours for low pay, and had no rights. Mandela found work as a night watchman at a gold mine. The job was hard, and the pay was small. He lived in a small room, often went hungry, and studied by candlelight. But he never stopped believing in education. He was determined to build a better future. He eventually enrolled at the University of Witwatersrand, one of the few institutions that allowed black students. There, Mandela studied law. But more than books, it was the people around him who inspired him. He met other young black South Africans who were passionate about justice, freedom, and change. They held secret meetings and spoke about a new kind of South Africa, one where all people could live together in peace. It was during these years that Mandela joined the African National Congress, ANC, a political group fighting against apartheid. He listened to powerful speeches, shared ideas, and began to find his voice. Nelson Mandela had taken his first real step on a long and difficult journey. He was no longer just a boy from the village. He was a man with a mission to change the world. Dreams beyond the hills. In the heart of Johannesburg, a city full of energy and struggle, Nelson Mandela began a new chapter of his life. The hills of his village were far behind him now. The open skies of the countryside had been replaced by tall buildings and busy streets. But deep inside, his dream of justice still burned. Mandela worked hard to survive. He rented a tiny room in Alexandria, one of the city's poorest townships. The streets were crowded, the air was dusty, and life was tough. At night, he could hear people crying, laughing, and shouting. Life here was raw and real. By day, he worked as a clerk at a law firm, learning about the legal system. By night, he studied under dim candlelight, reading every book he could find. He was determined to become a lawyer, not just to earn a living, but to fight back using knowledge. He believed that law could be a weapon for justice. But Mandela wasn't alone. He found a new family in the African National Congress, ANC, especially among the young members. Together, they formed the ANC Youth League, a group of passionate students and activists. They didn't want to wait. They wanted action. They wanted change. Mandela became known for his powerful words. He was not afraid to speak the truth, even when it was dangerous. He spoke at secret meetings and open gatherings, calling for justice, equality, and freedom. People listened. People followed. He had become a voice of the voiceless. In 1944, Mandela met a young nurse named Evelyn Mays. She was intelligent, strong, and deeply caring. They fell in love and soon married. They started a family, building a home filled with laughter and love. But even as a husband and father, Mandela could not ignore the fight around him. Balancing family and activism was difficult. Sometimes, he missed important moments with his children, but he believed he was fighting for their future. He once said, "There is no passion to be found in settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living." In 1948, the South African government introduced even harsher apartheid laws. These laws controlled where black people could live, work, and whom they could marry. The laws separated schools, buses, benches, and neighborhoods. Mandela and his friends in the ANC knew they had to act. They organized peaceful protests, marches, and strikes. Inspired by the ideas of Mahatma Gandhi, Mandela believed in nonviolent resistance. He marched alongside thousands who risked their jobs, homes, and lives for freedom. They held signs. They sang songs of hope. They stood in silence against police with guns. But the government responded with violence. Protesters were beaten. Some were killed. Mandela himself was arrested many times, but he refused to stop. He believed that true courage was not the absence of fear, but moving forward in spite of it. By 1952, Mandela had become a lawyer. With his friend Oliver Tambo, he opened the first black-owned law firm in South Africa. Their office was small and simple, but it was a place of hope. Poor black South Africans came to them for help, and Mandela defended those who had no voice in court. He spent his days fighting injustice in the courtroom and his nights planning with the ANC. He worked endlessly, driven by a dream. That dream was not just for himself, but for every child who wanted to play freely, every parent who wanted to raise their family in peace, and every person who deserved to be treated equally. Yet Mandela also knew the road ahead would be long and dangerous. The system they were fighting was powerful, and it would not fall easily. But he believed that even the tallest mountain could be climbed, step by step. Mandela's dream was growing. It was no longer just his. It belonged to the people of South Africa. And with every speech, every case, every act of resistance, he took one more step on his long walk to freedom. The fight for justice begins. The winds of change were beginning to blow across South Africa, and Nelson Mandela was standing in the heart of the storm. He was now a lawyer, a father, and a rising leader in the African National Congress, ANC. But more than anything, he was a man filled with purpose. The fight for justice had truly begun. Mandela's law office in Johannesburg became a symbol of hope. Black South Africans came in every day, people who had been unfairly arrested, evicted from their homes, or mistreated by the police. Mandela and his partner, Oliver Tambo, didn't turn anyone away. They gave legal help to people who had no one else to defend them. Some could not afford to pay, but Mandela helped them anyway. He believed that every human being deserved dignity. Outside the courtroom, the struggle was growing. In 1950, Mandela and the Youth League called for a national day of protest. Thousands of people joined across the country. They wore black, stayed home from work, and raised their voices in silence. It was a peaceful message, but the government was not pleased. Mandela was arrested again, but he didn't stop. In fact, the more they tried to silence him, the louder his message became. He traveled to different towns and cities, giving speeches full of passion. He told people that South Africa could be better, that one day, all races could live together as equals. People listened. Young people joined the movement. Women, workers, and students stood together. The ANC grew stronger, but so did the government's cruelty. In 1955, Mandela helped organize the Congress of the People, a massive gathering where thousands came together to write a new vision for South Africa. It was called the Freedom Charter, and it began with powerful words: "South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white." The charter called for equal rights, fair wages, free education, and the right to vote. But the government called it treason. Police stormed the event, arrested leaders, and labeled them enemies of the state. In 1956, Mandela and 155 others were arrested and charged with treason. The trial lasted for 5 years. During this time, Mandela's life was filled with uncertainty. Would he go to prison forever? Would the movement survive? But Mandela never stopped fighting. Even in court, he remained calm and focused. He used the trial to explain their cause to the world. At the end, all charges were dropped, but the government had sent a message. They were watching. At home, Mandela's marriage to Evelyn was beginning to suffer. His heart was with his people, but it pulled him away from his family. Eventually, they separated. It was a painful moment, but Mandela continued on his path. Then came a tragedy that shook the entire nation. In 1960, a peaceful protest in the town of Sharpeville ended in blood. Police opened fire on the crowd, killing 69 unarmed men, women, and children. The world watched in horror. The South African government responded by banning the ANC, making it illegal. Mandela realized something had changed. Peaceful protest alone was not enough. The government was using guns, prisons, and fear. They were not listening. So Mandela made a difficult decision. He helped create a new secret group called Umkhonto we Sizwe, which means Spear of the Nation. Their goal was not to hurt people, but to sabotage government buildings and symbols of apartheid. Mandela believed this was the only way to be heard. Now, Mandela was not just a lawyer or a leader. He was a freedom fighter in the shadows. He wore disguises, used fake names, and traveled in secret. He trained in other countries and met with supporters around the world. He became known as the Black Pimpernel, a man the police could not catch. But in 1962, they finally did. Mandela was arrested and charged with sabotage, treason, and attempting to overthrow the government. During his trial, he gave a powerful speech that made headlines across the globe. He said, "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." These words echoed around the world. Mandela was sentenced to life in prison. The government thought they had silenced him forever, but they were wrong. Mandela's fight was just entering a new chapter, one that would last 27 years behind bars, yet still moving the hearts of millions. From peaceful protest to armed resistance. When Nelson Mandela entered prison in 1962, he was only 44 years old. But his spirit was already that of a wise and fearless warrior. The South African government believed that locking him away would end the struggle. Instead, they lit a fire that would spread across the world. Mandela was sent to Robben Island, a harsh prison off the coast of Cape Town. There, surrounded by cold ocean waters, he was forced to work in a limestone quarry under the burning sun. The dust hurt his eyes and lungs. His tiny cell had no bed, just a thin mat on the floor. Letters were rare, and he was allowed only one visitor every 6 months. But Mandela refused to break. He used his time in prison to grow stronger. He read books, studied politics, and even learned the language of his enemies, Afrikaans, so he could understand them better. He held secret classes, teaching younger prisoners about leadership, law, and human rights. Robben Island became his classroom, and Mandela became its teacher. The world outside had not forgotten him. All over South Africa and across the globe, people chanted, "Free Nelson Mandela." Protesters held signs, sang songs, and demanded justice. Celebrities, politicians, and everyday people joined the movement. Countries began to put economic pressure on South Africa, refusing to trade with them until apartheid ended. Inside prison, Mandela could feel the winds of change. Even some of the prison guards began to respect him. They saw his calm strength, his discipline, and his kindness. Mandela once said, "Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed toward the sun, one's feet moving forward." He believed that even in darkness, there was always light. During his 27 years in prison, Mandela was moved to different locations. Each place brought new challenges. Yet, his dignity never left him. He walked tall, spoke clearly, and never begged. He became more than a prisoner. He became a symbol of hope. The apartheid government began to feel the pressure. Protests grew larger. Young people filled the streets, shouting for freedom. Music, poetry, and art carried Mandela's name to every corner of the world. His face appeared on posters. His words were spoken in schools. He had become the heart of a movement. Behind bars, Mandela also began to think differently. He realized that if South Africa was to have a future, it could not be built on anger and revenge. It had to be built on peace and forgiveness. He began to secretly communicate with the government. opening the door to negotiation. Then, the day finally came. On February 11th, 1990, Nelson Mandela walked out of prison, holding the hand of his wife, Winnie. He was 71 years old. His hair was gray, his face aged, but his spirit was powerful. All around the world, people cried and cheered. The impossible had happened. Mandela stood before a sea of supporters and said, "I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people." He called for unity, healing, and rebuilding. He did not seek revenge. He offered reconciliation. His release was the first step, but the road ahead was still long. Mandela returned to the African National Congress and began working toward South Africa's first democratic elections. His goal was simple, yet powerful, to create a country where Black, white, Indian, and mixed-race people could live together with equal rights. Many people doubted it was possible. The country was still deeply divided. There were threats of violence, protests, and fears of civil war. But Mandela refused to let the country fall into chaos. He met with former enemies. He shook hands with those who once jailed him. He said, "Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies." He chose peace. And in 1994, history was made. For the first time, all South Africans were allowed to vote. People stood in long lines for hours, smiling, crying, singing. On April 27, 1994, Nelson Mandela was elected president of South Africa. He had gone from prisoner to president, from protester to peacemaker. But more than that, Mandela had proven something powerful, that even after the hardest battles, forgiveness is stronger than hate, and hope is stronger than fear. Prison walls, unbreakable will. Nelson Mandela's time in prison was supposed to silence him. Instead, it transformed him into a global symbol of courage, wisdom, and strength. The cold walls of Robben Island could not hold back his dreams. His spirit was unbreakable. Mandela spent 18 of his 27 years in Robben Island. Life there was difficult, both physically and emotionally. The prison was surrounded by icy waters. The guards were often cruel. Prisoners were forced to break rocks in the hot sun. Mandela was given thin clothes, little food, and no comfort. He was not allowed to wear sunglasses while working in the limestone quarry, and the harsh white dust damaged his eyes forever. But even in those harsh conditions, Mandela stood tall. He woke up early each day, exercised, and kept a routine. He believed in discipline. He believed that a leader must always stay ready, even in the darkest place. He said, "I am fundamentally an optimist. Whether that comes from nature or nurture, I cannot say." He was allowed one visitor and one letter every 6 months, but he never lost touch with the outside world. News reached him in secret ways. Messages were hidden in food, books, and letters. The prison guards called him troublemaker, but many also began to admire his strength. Mandela was not alone. Other leaders of the ANC were imprisoned with him. Together, they formed a community behind bars. They studied, debated, and trained their minds. Robben Island became a university of resistance, and Mandela was one of its greatest teachers. He also made an effort to understand his captors. He learned Afrikaans, the language of the white South African rulers. He spoke with the guards, listened to them, and treated them with respect. Some of them, over time, changed the way they saw him. Mandela believed that even his enemies were human beings. As the years passed, Mandela became more than a name. He became a movement. Across the globe, people demanded his release. Students protested. Musicians sang about him. World leaders called for an end to apartheid. The slogan, "Free Nelson Mandela," was heard from the streets of New York to the villages of India. Inside prison, Mandela watched the world begin to change. New generations were rising. They were bold, angry, and ready to fight. But Mandela knew the cost of anger. He believed that true victory was not destroying the enemy, but building a new nation together. In the 1980s, the apartheid government began to realize that the system could not survive. The economy was suffering. The world was watching. And Mandela, locked away, aging, but unbroken, was at the center of it all. In secret meetings, government officials began to talk with him. They offered him release if he would give up the struggle. But Mandela refused. He said, "Your freedom and mine cannot be separated. I cannot be free while my people are not." Even after 20 years in prison, he would not accept freedom with conditions. Finally, After long negotiations, the government gave in. On February 11th, 1990, Nelson Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison. His fist raised, his face calm, his heart full. The world cheered. Some cried. Some danced. His walk to freedom became one of the most iconic moments in history. But Mandela knew this was not the end. He still had work to do. He still had a country to heal. South Africa was filled with pain, fear, and anger. He had to lead it into peace, not through force, but through forgiveness. Mandela had learned something in prison that few ever do. The power to forgive is stronger than the power to punish. And now, he would use that power to build a new South Africa. The long walk to freedom. When Nelson Mandela walked out of prison in 1990, he entered a world that had changed, but not enough. The chains of apartheid had begun to crack, but the country was still deeply divided. Anger was everywhere. Fear lived in both black and white hearts. And yet, Mandela stood in the middle, holding a vision of peace. He was now a free man, but the mission was not complete. Mandela returned to his leadership role in the African National Congress, ANC. He began to meet with political rivals, white government leaders, and even those who once called him a terrorist. Many were surprised. Mandela didn't demand revenge. He didn't scream with anger. He shook hands, looked people in the eye, and said, "Let's build this country together." He understood that true freedom is more than walking out of a cell. It is about rebuilding hearts, repairing trust, and creating a place where all people feel they belong. The road was not easy. Many black South Africans were tired of waiting. They had lost family, jobs, homes. Some wanted war. Others didn't trust white leaders. Meanwhile, white South Africans feared that change meant punishment and chaos. Mandela had to lead both groups. He spoke with strength and compassion. He reminded everyone that the future was in their hands. We are not enemies. We are fellow citizens. In 1994, history turned a new page. For the first time, every South African could vote, no matter their race. On Election Day, people lined up for hours. Old men, young women, the rich, the poor, they all came with hope. Some waited all night just for the chance to cast their vote. And when the results were announced, Nelson Mandela was chosen as president of South Africa. It was a moment the world had never seen. A man once jailed for 27 years now held the highest office in the land. But Mandela didn't smile for himself. He smiled for every person who had suffered. Every child who could now dream freely. Every grandparent who had lived to see the day apartheid fell. In his first speech as president, Mandela said, "Never, never and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another." But he didn't just speak about peace, he lived it. One of his most powerful acts came in 1995 during the Rugby World Cup. Rugby had always been seen as a white man's sport. Many black South Africans saw it as a symbol of their suffering. But Mandela had a different vision. He put on the green jersey of the South African national team, the Springboks, and walked onto the field before the final match. When the mostly white crowd saw him, wearing the colors they loved, they cheered. In that moment, Mandela showed the world what leadership looked like: forgiveness, unity, and courage. His presidency lasted only one term, but his impact would last forever. He didn't hold on to power. He passed it on, proving that real leaders know when to step back. After leaving office, Mandela worked for peace, education, and health. He helped fight poverty and raise awareness about HIV/AIDS, which was affecting millions in Africa. He traveled the world, met young people, gave speeches, and kept reminding us all of one simple truth: we can change the world. On December 5, 2013, Nelson Mandela passed away at the age of 95. The world stopped to mourn. Millions of people, presidents, celebrities, students, and farmers, gathered to say goodbye. But even in death, Mandela's message lived on. He had taught us that no matter how high the wall, we can climb it. No matter how long the road, we can walk it. And no matter how dark the night, we can light a candle of hope. His life was not just a story. It was a lesson that courage is stronger than fear, that forgiveness is stronger than hate, and that one person can truly change the world, leading with forgiveness. As the first black president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela stepped into power not with fists, but with open hands. His heart carried no hatred, even after 27 years in prison. Instead, He carried a message of forgiveness, not just as a political strategy, but as a personal belief. He understood the danger of resentment. He knew how easy it would have been to divide the country further, to punish those who had supported apartheid. But Mandela believed that if South Africa was to survive, it needed to heal, and healing could not happen without forgiveness. Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies, he once said. Instead of revenge, he offered unity. One of his first major acts as president was forming the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, this commission allowed people to come forward and speak about the crimes they had committed or witnessed during apartheid. Victims shared their pain. Perpetrators were asked to tell the truth. It was not about forgetting the past. It was about facing it honestly, learning from it, and moving forward together. Some people didn't understand Mandela's approach. They wanted punishment, not peace. But Mandela kept choosing the higher path. He believed that true justice included understanding, and that even enemies could change. He also used symbols to bring people together. Rugby, for example, had long been a sport loved by white South Africans. For black citizens, it represented exclusion and suffering. But Mandela wore the Springbok jersey and supported the national team during the 1995 Rugby World Cup. When South Africa won, Mandela stood next to the white team captain, smiling. That moment, captured in photographs and film, became a symbol of national unity. It told a powerful story. We are one people, one nation. Mandela's leadership was never loud or showy. He didn't need to shout to be heard. He led through calm, kindness, and confidence. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words carried the weight of wisdom and experience. Even after leaving office, Mandela continued to serve. He worked to bring education to children, to fight poverty, and to support those suffering from HIV/AIDS, which had become a crisis in South Africa. He met with world leaders, youth organizations, and charities. Wherever he went, he brought hope. In his later years, Mandela's body grew weaker, but his voice never lost strength. He spoke less often, but when he did, the world listened. Young people called him Tata, a Xhosa word for father. To many, he truly was the father of the nation. When he passed away in 2013, people around the globe lit candles, sang songs, and shared stories. Streets were filled with flowers. World leaders came to South Africa to honor him, and children, who never met him, stood proudly, knowing they lived in the light he helped create. Mandela's legacy is not just written in books. It's written in the freedom of his people, in the peace that followed his leadership, and in the hearts of those he inspired. His story reminds us that leadership is not about power. It's about purpose. It's not about taking. It's about giving your time, your courage, your love. Nelson Mandela led a nation with compassion. He showed the world that even after unimaginable pain, you can still choose love. That's what made him great, not just his victories, but the way he won them. And now, his story belongs to us all. We carry his message every time we choose peace over anger, every time we stand for what's right, even when it's hard. His life was a reminder that no matter who you are or where you start, you can rise. Because in the end, as Mandela once said, the greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. The legacy lives on. Even after stepping down as president in 1999, Nelson Mandela never stopped serving. He had already led South Africa through one of the most difficult transitions in history, but his heart still belonged to the people. For Mandela, leadership was not about titles or power. It was about action, love, and responsibility. He spent his later years supporting causes close to his heart. One of his most important missions was the fight against HIV/AIDS. At a time when many leaders avoided the subject, Mandela spoke openly. After losing his own son to the disease, he called for education, awareness, and treatment. He believed that silence was dangerous and that speaking out could save lives. He also created the Nelson Mandela Foundation, an organization focused on human rights, dialogue, and social justice. Through this foundation, he encouraged young people to become active citizens, to speak out against injustice, and to never give up on making the world a better place. Mandela became a global elder, a voice of wisdom for the entire world. He met with presidents, students, activists, and children. He told them all the same thing. You have the power to make a difference. Even though he had aged and walked more slowly, his words moved mountains. He reminded us that peace is always possible, even in the darkest moments. That forgiveness is a choice, not a weakness. And that one life can touch millions. His quotes continue to guide people everywhere. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. It always seems impossible until it's done. I never lose. I either win or learn. These were not just words. They were truths born from suffering, patience, and deep belief. On his 90th birthday, world leaders, artists, and youth gathered to honor him. Mandela simply smiled and said, "It's in your hands now." That was his final message to the next generation. He had walked his path. Now it was our turn. When he passed away on December 5, 2013, the world mourned. But the feeling was not only sadness. It was also gratitude. Because Mandela's life had shown the best of humanity, strength in pain, kindness in struggle, and hope in the face of hate. Today, schools, streets, and parks around the world bear his name. Statues of him stand tall in cities across continents. But his true legacy is not in stone. It is in the hearts of people who still believe in justice, equality, and peace. For English learners, Mandela's life is not just a story of history. It's a story of hope. A reminder that no matter where you come from, no matter how hard life gets, you can rise. You can lead. You can shine. So whenever you feel tired, lost, or afraid, think of Mandela. Think of a young boy who herded cattle in a rural village, who studied by candlelight, who walked into prison with courage, and who came out ready to forgive. He showed us that we don't have to be perfect. We just have to keep moving forward. And that is a legacy worth carrying. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the life of Nelson Mandela. We hope his story has not only helped you learn English, but also inspired your heart. Remember, Mandela showed us that even in the darkest times, we can choose hope over fear, forgiveness over hate, and action over silence. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. What part touched you the most? How did it help your English? And don't forget, like, subscribe, and share this video with friends who need a little inspiration today. We'll be back soon with more powerful stories to help you learn English through the lives of amazing people. Until then, keep learning, keep dreaming, and remember, you have the power to make a difference. See you next time. Here are 20 key vocabulary words that appear frequently, with simple English definitions and example sentences to support English learners. Freedom, noun, the state of being free to live, speak, or act without control. Example, Mandela spent his life fighting for the freedom of his people. Justice, noun, fairness and the quality of being right or lawful. Example, he believed justice must exist for peace to be possible. Forgiveness, noun, the act of letting go of anger or blame towards someone who has hurt you. Example, Mandela chose forgiveness over revenge. Apartheid, noun, a system of racial segregation in South Africa. Example, under apartheid, black and white people were kept apart by law. Leader, noun, someone who guides or inspires others. Example, Mandela became a leader by standing up for what was right. Hope, noun, the feeling that something good will happen. Example, his words gave hope to people during dark times. Struggle, noun/verb, a difficult effort to overcome problems or achieve a goal. Example, the struggle against apartheid lasted many years. Unity, noun, the state of being joined together as one. Example, Mandela worked to bring unity to a divided nation. Prison, noun, a place where people are held as punishment for a crime. Example, he spent 27 years in prison but never gave up. Sacrifice, noun, giving up something important for a greater purpose. Example, he made many sacrifices for the future of his country. Courage, noun, the ability to face danger or fear bravely. Example, it takes courage to forgive those who hurt you. Reconciliation, noun, the act of restoring friendly relations after conflict. Example, South Africa needed reconciliation after years of apartheid. Equality, noun, the state of being equal in status, rights, and opportunity. Example, Mandela's dream was a country where everyone had equality. Education, noun, the process of learning and gaining knowledge. Example, he believed education was the key to changing the world. Speech, noun, A formal talk given to an audience. Example, his prison trial speech inspired the world. Legacy, noun, something meaningful left behind after someone's life. Example, Mandela's legacy continues to inspire people globally. Inspire, verb, to fill someone with the desire to act or create. Example, his courage inspired generations of future leaders. Resistance, noun, fighting against something unfair or oppressive. Example, he led the resistance against apartheid with powerful words. Humble, adjective, modest, not proud or boastful. Example, despite his fame, Mandela remained humble. Peace, noun, the state of calm and harmony, without conflict. Example, he believed peace could only come through forgiveness.